Writing a good story is hard. Making a good movie is hard. Transforming one into the other is even harder. Welcome to Adaptive Difficulty. This is a show where a couple of book lovers take on the challenge of adaptations. I'm Cameron, and with my friend Josh, we explore the difficult and sometimes bizarre choices that happen in the course of making an adaptation. This week, we are exploring the 2019 film Little Women, directed and written by Greta Gerwig, based on the Louisa Alcott's famous novel, Little Women.
He's gone to be a soldier in the army of the Lord. He's gone to be a soldier in the army of the Lord. He's gone to be a soldier in the army of the Lord. His soul is marching on.
Hello, I'm Josh.
And I'm Cameron. And we've got a special
for the
guest.
First time ever.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm Josh's wife. Thank you guys for having me on this week.
Well, you know, we can't
welcome.
Little Women without having at least one woman on the podcast.
Of course, you know, when Josh told me that you guys were doing Little Women, you know, my first thought was, oh, this is perfect. Exactly what we need is two men's perspective on womanhood. So I was really excited.
It's never been done before. I'll give you that much. So
Exactly. Well, I will say Little Women is one of my favorite stories ever from childhood. And the 1994 movie is actually like my favorite movie of all time. And so I've probably seen it about 30 times at least.
We are not doing that one.
So of course we're not doing that one. But anyway, I'm excited to be here and talk about it.
Well, I'm excited for your perspective as well.
Normally we just start with what is your prior experience with the book, which you've already kind of covered, but where are the other two of us on it?
I will confess, this is not a book that I read in my childhood. It wasn't really until I went to, I read it for a class at Center College, but you know, it was a class on child's literature, or children's literature. So, but I loved it basically since I opened it up and kind of started reading it.
I saw the movie that we watched for this, the 2019 one, when it was in theaters. But other than that, this was my first time reading it and first time seeing the movie again since then.
Have you ever watched the other one with me, the 94 version? No, you haven't. Not. That's surprising. As a kid, I think I read an abridged version in elementary school. And so that was my favorite book. And I don't know if I even fully realized it was an abridged version. I surely at 11 years old did not read the full thing.
The full 500 pages.
You know, I was a big reader, but not that big of a reader.
I remember being in fourth grade, and I would go to the library once a day and get Around the World in 80 Days and read the whole thing. And I go the next day and get Journey to the Center of the Earth. And I thought I was just churning out classic literature because I didn't know what a great illustrated classics was.
Mm-hmm.
So
I just didn't read.
I think the one I read. Really, you weren't a big reader as a kid?
Not really. I think there was from until about, I would say probably 6th grade. I think I was probably a pretty big reader. And then from about 7th grade until about I became an English major, it was kind of not really kind of any kind of reading for fun.
So now that we've all actually have read the book recently, what did we all think of the book itself before we talk about the movie?
Goated American classic.
Yeah, I loved it, you know, but it's a genre of book or a type of book that I really enjoy.
Yeah, it's very slice of life, which you tend to like.
Yes, for sure.
I also loved it. I thought it was just very charming the entire time. And kind of humorous, very funny, but in kind of a gentle way where it just teases the characters, you know, because they're all a little larger than life.
Yeah, and I think, you know, even though it's very moralistic, it's very preachy, but not in a way that feels obnoxious, I guess. It just feels kind of comforting almost, I guess, because a lot of it comes from Marmee herself, who is just a nurturing character.
I feel like it gets away with that because this narration is more realistic and Marmee is, but the characters are still flawed and not necessarily moral the entire time, and it doesn't like admonish them too much, so you don't feel like it's just ranting at you the entire time.
And I also really
Do you disagree, Cameron?
No, I kind of see your point where it's, I mean, when you look at kind of like the main character, if you're going to point to just one person, it's like Jo, and she, struggles with like being as moral as like Beth is naturally, or as Marmee kind of wants her to be. And so just kind of seeing that kind of struggle where she's not like punished and like belittled for not being a good person or a good woman, I guess. She's still kind of in the process of like figuring it out.
Yeah, and I think that's, I guess, the point of the book is, they're figuring it out and growing up. And so I think the book does a really good job too of showing each individual character, like giving each one their time to be developed, which is I think a really good thing. I was kind of surprised actually, because I guess maybe this is jumping the gun a little bit, but the movies tend to be Jo-centric, at least somewhat. And I didn't feel like the book was that way as much. Each chapter or so, it would jump around.
I think Jo is probably the most complex, not to say the others aren't. And I also think, and I guess we'll get into more of this when we are talking about the movie, it makes sense that people who are making movies would relate to her the most and see her as the protagonist.
I also...
You think people are more prone to relate to Jo?
I think creative people making movies are.
I do also think that there's probably an element where like she's like, I don't know, what a lot of, and don't want to speak for all women, of course, but like what a lot of women kind of aspire to be. Where
just
like,
no women, you.
Well, like, they, deal with, the repercussions of being a minority. And Jo kind of tries to eschew that kind of whole responsibility and not be a part of it, which I can see is why it might be attractive to people who kind of have to deal with it on a daily basis. And that's why so many of them are kind of upset when at the end, or at least what I've read and what my peers in class mentioned, was that they were very upset at the end whenever Jo kind of does get married and kind of settles down.
Yeah, I feel like, though, that is, like, I think it's interesting because as someone who grew up with the story, as a kid, I felt that way. I was very much more staunch, like, she shouldn't have ended up with Professor Bear. She should have, well, when I was really young, thought she should have ended up with Laurie, and then probably in my teens, I was like, she shouldn't have gotten married at all. But I also think now, as a, woman whose prefrontal cortex is fully developed, I like that she changes. She doesn't stay static the whole time. Although I know also that is, it's not what Louisa May Alcott wanted for Jo. And so that's maybe something to discuss too.
Which I think we'll have to get into that. Because the movie addresses that pretty directly. So I'm sure we'll touch on it again. The last thing, I guess I kind of referenced this earlier, but just talking about the book specifically, and I said it's kind of larger than life. I just thought it was like, the characters are almost like mannerist in like, they're so realistic sometimes, and they're so like complex and developed, but then they just do these things that are like almost cartoonishly over the top, but still feel real to them. Like when Laurie's depressed in Europe and he's like, I'm going to write an opera and be the next Mozart, and Jo will be the villain of it. And like, or like Amy is going to give the shoes to Mr. Lawrence. And when you read it, it's like, that is the scariest thing imaginable to do, because to Amy, that's what it feels like. Like, I feel like it does so good.
Do you mean Beth?
Beth, yeah, Beth, not Amy. Beth is going to give the shoes to Mr. Lawrence, and I feel like the narration does such a good job of like heightening everything to how the characters are feeling it, but almost like more than life.
Yeah, I mean, it almost kind of is like a melodrama almost, like for like these different points. Like I always think of when I think of the childhood section, or I guess when they're more explicitly children, whenever Amy has to like suffer in the schoolhouse because all her limes are thrown out of the window, just like the narration of it is just like very, very like intense, and you can really kind of, inhabit those kinds of feelings that, she's actually experiencing, and, she thinks it's more serious than it is, but even though it's not that serious, it's still serious for you because, the narration is so on point.
Yeah, and I think it's important too in children's literature, which, I have not formally studied children's literature, but I feel like, there was a time when children are just portrayed as or expected to be little adults and not feel their feelings and react the way a kid would. And so I think it is a breath of fresh air to see, even like in a book as old as this one, young characters who are allowed to experience life the way a kid would. Those are big deals to a kid, even if it doesn't seem like a big deal to an adult.
Yeah, this is one of those things where, like, this is one of the more earlier cases of, like, an author trying to actually focus in on children as characters themselves, and, like, children focusing on them as how they think about it as children. That was, like, the reason why it was included in the class I took at Center was, this is one of the first examples where the focus for the large majority of the novel is on them growing up, and you can't do that without having them, be children.
Yeah.
Any last things people thought about the book they want to say before we also discuss the movie?
Did you all think that the book was like too long, or like that there was any parts that could have just not been included? Because it's definitely a long book, and it's not a fast-paced book for sure, which
I feel like the book was so episodic that I didn't really mind it, because even if it wasn't going very fast, if you read 10 pages of it, you were still getting like a self-contained little story each chapter, so you could read it bite-sized. I think the second half dragged a little more than the first half.
I see it kind of as like, this is like you'd read one chapter to your child every night, or have them read it with you or whatever. So it's like a very brief kind of like thing you do over the course of like several weeks, rather than kind of just sitting down there and doing it. So in that way, I feel like it would be less obvious how long it is.
Yeah, and I think too, like when it was originally published, it wasn't all in one set, and so I'm sure that...
Yeah, it even specifically says halfway through, when the little girl section ends, it's like, and if the readers should vote or whatever, then there shall be more adventures of the March Sisters.
Okay, well, let's talk about the movie.
Okay. Anybody have a general thought on it that they just have to get out, or do we want to go chronological?
They did not include my favorite scene, which is the jelly won't gel scene.
Which one?
the jelly won't gel. When Meg is like having a crisis
meltdown
in the kitchen.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we can probably get into it later. I think I have some thoughts about how Meg was portrayed, and Beth too.
Yeah. Well, I guess my overall thought starts at the beginning, because I guess, and maybe I'm wrong, but my kind of reading of this version of Little Women is that if Jo is Louisa May Alcott's like self-insert in the novel, I think Greta Gerwig takes that and makes the movie her self-insert or autobiography, just in a more like coded way, it feels like. I don't know if that's the sense you all got. And it starts from the very first scene being, turning in your work to an editor, since she is someone who does that as a director and a screenwriter.
I see that. I was mainly focused on, or what I kind of was observing throughout the movie, was how like in the book, it's very like focused around the concepts of like Christianity and whatnot, and what makes a good person.
Yeah.
And whereas this one is much more focused on like the capitalistic notion of like how do you exist in a world that requires you to have money at a time when the only way you can have money is or
to marry well if you're a woman,
and even then it's not really your money, as Amy says later on.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that is an irrelevant change. Like, well, I think the fact that the book is largely referencing the Pilgrim's Progress, like, in that directly relates to the individual, like, character arcs that they're all going through, and, becoming a better person based on those, like, Christian values that they have. And so I think a little bit is lost in the fact that the movie doesn't.
And it's interesting that the movie doesn't have that at all, because Greta Gerwig is currently adapting like the entirety of the Narnia series. So unless she's also going to make that completely irreligious, which seems almost impossible, she's clearly not opposed to, making a Christian themed movie.
Well, I mean, I guess, this comes into the play of like, okay, what's the role for women underneath Christianity? And is that something that like allows them to exist in a society as equals with their male counterparts, which, is not really a topic that's addressed in the Chronicles of Narnia, but is kind of a central.
That's true.
Is kind of a central focus of, I think, even this version of, or even the book version of Little Women, at least a little bit, where it's like, women have a certain lot in life, and Jo rages against that because she thinks it's not fair.
Right. And then I think within the first scene is when you get that direct line from the editor that's like, if there's going to be a girl, then make sure she's married by the end or dead.
Yeah, I think that's a direct quote from the book, too.
Is it?
I think it is, if I'm not mistaken. I think Jo gets told that when she takes her book to the editor.
Because that's obviously what happens to each of the women in Little Women.
And that's what happened to Alcott.
Right. But I almost feel like, yes, that happened to Louisa May Alcott, but I feel like she, and maybe this is off base, but even though that was a mandate given to her, she still wrote the ending with such sincerity and skill that it doesn't affect the book. So it almost feels mean to it to emphasize that point.
Yeah, it's like, it's not like she just like, she didn't think about it. She just married Jo off to a random person. Like, it's arguably probably the best relationship in the book that she ends up being with Mr. Bear.
Yeah. I did see someone on like Goodreads say like Mr. Bear is like very clearly like a fantasized idea of a man that Alcott would possibly marry. Like doesn't seem completely real necessarily, but I still think it was a sweet relationship in the book.
I feel like though with Gerwig's interpretation, or the fact that she's making this movie in, what year is it, 2019? Like, it's more about speaking to not necessarily the book's time period, but like to women now in modern day. Not that she's saying women need to be either married or dead, but like in society, what is our role as women? Is it like right now it's either to serve men in some way or to be nothing at all, to be dead. And so I feel like it makes sense that she chose to have that line so blatantly open the film.
I think that like also immediately afterwards, it emphasizes. I was thinking about how like he's initially says we usually pay like 25 to 30 for this. We'll give you 20 for it. And I didn't know if, this was supposed to be some kind of, gender pay gap or whatever.
It definitely is. Yeah. And maybe I completely misremember. I also think she gets paid the normal rate in the book. At least she gets paid what he claims is the normal rate in the book.
I think so.
So, yeah.
What did you all think about the movie time hops? You know, it's more organized thematically, I guess, rather than chronologically, whereas the book is chronological.
I think the movie made the decision that the main story it wanted to tell was the two primary romantic relationships, Laurie and Bear, and really mainly Laurie. It wanted to tell the stories that involved Laurie. And so it started at the most logical place to do that. Even though Laurie's in the kid scenes too, his romantic drama starts around where they start the book.
I almost disagree because I feel like the like having it not told in chronological order keeps those relationships from being developed in the movie.
I mean, the scenes still happen later.
So, I don't know. I'm kind of of a mind to agree in the sense that I felt that there were a lot of relationships, and I think particularly for this movie, Mr. Bear, that I didn't really feel like he had done all that much to really kind of earn me to want Joe and them to be together. And I don't know if you guys felt the same.
I do think he's underdeveloped, so I misspoke saying that.
Like, I think they definitely did a lot to develop, you know, Joe and Laurie, but there were very few scenes with Friedrich in them, and it definitely didn't show any of the scenes where
he's caring for the
Joe
kids
is falling in love with him,
which is normally watching him through the window.
Like the two scenes that they include are like him yelling at her about her work, and then him coming and playing on the piano. Like it's like there's such like a disconnect.
But yeah, well, I almost
it makes it seem like she loves him because he like resembles Beth in some way, and Beth is her like comforter. Like I miss in this version that development of that relationship, and so I am not a fan of just the time hopping.
Yeah, not to get too far ahead of ourselves because we'll have to talk about it for the ending, but I think the movie almost doesn't want you to want her to get with Friedrich because that's kind of its thesis, is that that's a forced relationship thrust upon the author.
I disagree, if only because Joe ends up talking to Marmee up in the attic, and she's like, I hate all the stuff about having to be married, but I'm also just very, very lonely. So like there's like this disconnect where it's like, is she supposed to be a strong, independent woman, or is she supposed to get married and have a relationship? And I think the question becomes,
or can you be both?
Why can't she be both?
Right.
Because like
I do
later
think
on, I was gonna say later on, whenever at the very end when the editor's like, you have to have her get married, she doesn't really put up much of a fight because she's happy with them getting married at that point. She's like, that's fine. I mean, she does put up a little bit of a fight where she's like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah. And then she's like, okay, we'll do it. And then they go out and kiss in the rain.
Yeah, I do think early on, at least, my conclusion about telling it out of order was that it makes the final romantic pairings really obvious. Like, they show you framed in like very elegant scenes, like Laurie and Amy and Friedrich and Joe very early on. Whereas you don't even meet Friedrich until like 400 pages into the book.
I almost wonder if it's like a way of like, you know, just telling the audience, you know, don't get hopeful that Joe and Laurie are going to be there, are going to get together. Because I mean, that is like a very like emotional...
Although I do think when I saw it in theaters in 2019, I thought that was a possibility throughout the entire runtime until it was clearly not. So,
and I think it serves the purpose of like you said, like not getting your hopes up that it's going to be Laurie, because I think this movie does a better job of making Laurie and Amy a more sympathetic match. I feel like just historically that is what people get mad about, is that Laurie ends up with Amy and people think that's unfair to Amy. And so I feel like it helps make us like that more.
I don't know. I never really had a problem with him and Amy getting together, if only because, like, Amy's so clearly, like, the right one of them for Laurie. Like, she's the one who likes the high class stuff. She's the one who wants to, be all of that and have all the, be wealthy. Whereas Meg doesn't really want that. Joe doesn't really want that. Beth doesn't want anything. So
I think Joe just feels like the intellectual match to Laurie because they argue and debate each other, which people see as flirtatious and lively.
But Bear is also
like they say, like they would
match.
just drive each other crazy because they also actually make each other mad pretty often.
And I feel like...
You can go.
Okay, well, I think that as much as Laurie is an intellectual match for Joe, like so is Friedrich. They both are. I think the difference is that Laurie idolizes Joe in a way that Friedrich doesn't, and he does not see her flaws because he's got his own baggage. Like, he just idealizes the entire March family, and Joe, he thinks, is his ticket into having a family like that, which is completely foreign to him. He's an orphan being raised by his grandpa who doesn't know how to raise a kid, or at least, generational differences. And so Laurie is not a good match for Joe because he doesn't really love her. He loves the idea of her, the idea of her family.
I'd even go so far as to say he loves the idea of loving her. Bring it like one step farther away. Because, I do think that, he wants to be a part of that family, if only because, like, his actual parents are, I think they're dead. I think that's what the implication is.
Yeah. Well, I get the fact that it's non-linear is probably the first big noticeable artistic choice in the movie. So let's move on to the second one, which is that when they do flashback, they use the exact same actors and they barely even try to dress them down. So where are we at on that?
Oh my gosh.
They knew it was a choice when they did it. So it's clearly deliberate because they know no one thinks they're actually young. So where are we at on it?
To me, it made it sometimes a little bit confusing to tell me, okay, where are we in this novel? Where it's like, are we before?
It was hairstyles. You had to look at their hairstyles. Like, Amy had bangs if she was young. And
yes, and it's
Joe
hard because it takes place over the course of, nearly 10 years. And so
I think there's 3 years when they're young, a 7-year gap, and 3 years when they're old.
I think it really takes away from the fact that they are supposed to be growing up. I hate that I love Florence Pugh. Love Florence Pugh as Amy. I hate that they did not cast a younger version of Amy. I think the older three girls, they could have gotten away with it, but not Amy. So much of Amy's character is the fact that she is the youngest and a child, still in school at the beginning.
I just feel like this movie was not that concerned about these people as children, or at least
because it starts with them as young adults, right?
Yeah, it's much more concerned with them of they're adults and how do they navigate being adults based on what happened as their children. But just the way it's framed, where you cut back and forth, it's the flashbacks aren't given as, I feel as much importance as that kind of overarching narrative of Joe going back to be with Beth and going from there on out.
Yeah. Not that I love it, but I guess I'll take the opposite stance in that I don't mind it. And I feel like a little bit of what it's trying to do is in this movie, the flashbacks, rather than be part of the main narrative like they are in the book when it's linear, are memories And that is kind of how memory feels, as you see people the way they are now, or you see yourself the way you are now in your memories sometimes, even though that's not really what the case was. So I think that's kind of the fact that it's almost unreal maybe is what it's going for.
Yeah, I think so. I think even the cinematography kind of plays
It's
into
very,
that. I noticed like the coloring
it does almost the
differences.
like, this is a dream sitcom, like highlights around the
Technicolor.
edge. Like it does that a lot.
Yeah. But I think it takes me out of the story a little bit to see Florence Pugh sitting in a schoolhouse with all these like actual little girls.
It is a weird move to like cast everyone else other than the main four characters age appropriate.
And here,
Well,
okay, and
it just
I'm
leads to
trying
them
not.
it just leads to them being larger than life, like you said, Josh.
It makes them really look like Little Women if you think about it.
And I'm trying not to bring my bias from loving the 1994 version as much as I do, but the 1994 version does have two different actresses for Amy, and the young Amy is Kirsten Dunst, who is also just phenomenal as young Amy, and I think that movie just doesn't do a good job with Amy's character in general. And so I understand why Greta Gerwig wouldn't want to, like, I think having two different actresses can be bad, because in the 94 version, I don't think older Amy does a good job of portraying the depth of that character the way Florence Pugh does. I guess I'm saying in my ideal movie, we would still have young Kirsten Dunst and grown Florence Pugh. But, you know.
I can see that.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the...
I've not
The
seen
movie
the night.
sucks because Greta Gerwig didn't age down Kirsten Dunst before filming it.
Well, I was going to move on to the next thing that I wrote down. I really like when Joe and Laurie meet for the first time. And I love that their lines are, "I'm only Joe," and then he says, "I'm only Laurie." And one thing I think that is significant to talk about is just the fact that the names that they go by, and I guess this is part of the theme, the names that they go by, you know, Joe is such a masculine
Mm-hmm.
name, whereas Laurie is definitely more feminine, which I just think is interesting and also fitting for their characters.
Yeah, it's one of those
course,
things.
Joe is, of course, supposed to be masculine or rejecting.
But is Laurie supposed to be feminine?
I mean, he's kind of got this weird, like, and this happens in both the book and the movie.
I mean, he is like best friends with four little girls and no one else. But
where, like, he's like this, like, other kind of, like, vaguely European, vaguely feminine kind of man kind of person based on, like, you know, his parents are kind of like,
Yeah.
his mom's Italian, I believe.
he's metrosexual.
So he's like
It's not necessarily that he's feminine, but he's not masculine in that, like, traditionally American sense. You know, he's very much a romantic, which I think is a big part of his character. He's very idealistic. You know, he loves music, he loves art. You know, and that's just not the typical American boy. And I think that is a deliberate choice.
Well, I mean, they did cast Timothée Chalamet for it, and he's, you know, he's not there to be your stereotypical.
Like I said while we were watching it, it's unbelievable that Timothée Chalamet is actually the most American member of the entire cast, practically, because he just seems so European. But
he's got a European
multiple
face.
of the Little Women are actually European.
But I feel like that is, you know, also part of why Joe feels the way that she does about him, because he is, I think she at her, like, in her heart, sees him as, one of her siblings,
He's
and
one of the
not
gals.
as one of the gals. I wrote that at one point. I said, Laurie wants to be one of the girls so bad. Like, he wants...
You probably... Was that when they were admitting him
Club?
to the Pickwick portfolio?
Yes, when they were admitting him to the Pickwick Club. Like, he so badly wants to be part of that. And she can't distinguish him from that sin. So there's no way that she could be romantically involved with him.
Yeah. Speaking of Laurie, but kind of veering to a different direction, his first scene with Amy, or one of his first scenes with Amy, and this is one thing in the movie I didn't love, is that he's turned into like a drunkard while he's in Europe as like a knockabout like guy.
He's like that in the book too.
I thought in the book, on Meg's wedding day, she's like, Laurie, will you promise me you'll never drink alcohol? And he's like, yes, I promise, because it's your wedding day. How could I say no? And the book's like, and Laurie followed that promise to the end of his days and was better for it. Which I don't want them to include that, because that was one of the sillier parts of the book. But he definitely wasn't a drunk.
I mean, I just think that he, like, maybe I'm just going back and putting the movie back in my book brain, but I mean, he's just kind of loafing about Europe, just partying casually.
Yeah. He definitely becomes like a lazy kind of walkabout, whatever.
He's consumed by ennui.
And I just felt like that develops slowly in the book to where you can kind of believe it. Like, he goes to college and becomes kind of this better than everything college boy and loses himself in Europe and all this. And making him just a drunk in the movie felt like they needed shorthand for all that development, because they didn't have time for it.
I can see that,
which is true, but...
and just I feel like that is part of, like, Laurie's just romanticism. Like, things don't really matter. Like, it's just about living in the moment. Which I really like, in, like, direct contrast to Amy. Like, I feel like this is why Amy and Laurie are such a good pair, because... Just to go back to my point of Laurie being the more feminine, romantic, idealistic, like, what I love about Amy in Greta Gerwig's version is that she is definitely, and she was this way in the book too, she's definitely more pragmatic and practical and realistic. And so I think that's why she and Laurie end up being a good match. And she is the one who's able to bring him back down to earth in Europe.
Well, yeah, because he's got such like a romantic's view of like love and marriage, and then she kind of really just quickly shuts him down whenever she's like, actually, it's a business contract.
Right, like he needs that, like he needs that reality check from her, and she needs his, like, let loose a little, have fun and enjoy things.
Yeah, I like that, because that scene you're talking about mildly annoyed me when I was watching it, because she very directly, I mean, she basically delivers like a modern feminist rant to the camera, which, not that I disagreed with any of it, but like, I felt like the book manages to address these problems of womanhood just kind of innately, because it's about women, but it doesn't have to deliver them directly to the audience. And the movie makes it a lot more explicit, to the point where it felt a little like attending, a 101 class on the subject. But I like what you're saying about how it actually delves into what each of the characters need from the other person.
I mean, I will say, in defense of this movie, if you're not explicit, audiences don't get it. Like, people are just bad movie watchers.
Well, that's true.
And, the movie doesn't have 500 pages to show the slow...
And the book, I would say that's not the main thing the book is about. The book is mainly just a nice, mostly Christian story of some women who grow up and what happens to them. And like I said, the problems are implicit in it, whereas the movie wants them to be the point of the movie. So...
I will say, I think one thing the movie misses is the fact that Amy goes through like a big, when she's staying with Aunt March and befriends, what is the housekeeper's name in the book? Aunt March's.
Oh, yeah, and she's
It's
a
like-
Catholic.
Yes, and she's Catholic, but anyway, they develop that friendship, and Amy kind of goes through her own, like, start of her change into becoming someone who's very selfless and thoughtful and kind, and we see a lot of that depth in Amy's character in the book, and while I like that Greta Gerwig did more with Amy than like previous movies have, I think we don't get that like gentleness and like what the book says about Amy is that she's like genuinely a good person, like as pragmatic as she is, as like ambitious as she is, she also wants to just be good. And I don't think movie Amy comes across as necessarily a kind person. Not that she's unkind, but you know what I mean. She's a little more harsh than I think book Amy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, say what you're gonna say.
I was just gonna say that. I mean, I like all the characters. I feel like I love Joe, but I feel like I also really like Amy in the book. Like, I feel like she has the most like interesting growth, and I don't know if that's because like she's the one who decides that she's not good enough to be a great artist, so she's gonna, give it up, which is kind of a hard choice to like make, and I think really kind of speaks to like how much she's doing in terms of soul searching and what she wants to do in her life, which is just kind of not really something that you see a lot in stories about creativity, because it's always like, oh, this person should go on and just do whatever they want to, create whatever story they want to, because it's the creating the art that's important.
Well, it's interesting because in the book, even Jo doesn't really accomplish the heights of what she expects of herself for her artistic career. She never publishes a book that she's proud of. She just publishes like scandalous stories to make some money, at least by
And even that's like frowned upon, because Mr. Bear comes in and is like, you should write good stories and not smut. I can't believe they did not include the Jelly Won't Gel scene.
I literally was like, this is so relatable. Like, I think they did Meg and Beth dirty.
More so like Meg than Beth, because Beth has her own like character arc or whatever, but she's easily the one that's like you can get rid of the most without like seriously affecting things.
It frustrates me that there is some Meg erasure in the movie, and I'll even go so far as to say, like, if the point of the movie is to be a like direct like feminist messaging, like, it's crappy that Meg is erased some just because she's not one of the ambitious ones, like
I do feel like that's kind of what it's going for, where like she chose like the most common outcome that they would have had at that time. Like,
right.
She chose a reasonable man who was not making a lot of money, and I'm not going to say that like this was like an intentional thing on Greta Gerwig's part, but like I wonder if she was like, it seems more interesting to do the other ones because they more closely tie to what kind of theme she wants to go about.
Right, and that is something that's frustrating to me, I think, just as a woman who wants to be taken seriously and have the opportunity to make my own choices for my life. It is almost unfeminist to not focus on Meg equally to the others, just because her path is different. And she does say, like, in the movie, like, it's not totally that way, because she does say in the movie, like, just because my choices are different than yours don't mean that it's unimportant.
I almost felt like the movie was kind of at odds with itself and kind of included that line out of the guilty conscience for being mostly about how women shouldn't have to get married.
Well, like, there's this other, like, later on, like, the three girls were walking by after Aunt March gives them their house, and Joe is like, you write stories to reflect you write stories about important events because it reflects that importance. And then Amy's like, no, you write stories and that helps give them importance. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, yeah, but you kind of just erased Meg's story almost out of this book where, like, she gets, like, I don't know,
which is
like 2 scenes.
I think it's interesting because I agree Meg's a bigger character in the book by a lot. But I think one thing the movie does that the book doesn't is Mr. Brooke kind of comes out of nowhere in the book and is just suddenly, like, there and is like, I'm in love with Meg. Is she in love with me?
I completely disagree.
And it takes, like, maybe a chapter or two for her to be like, okay, I love you. In the movie,
No, Josh,
yes, Meg
you're
gets...
wrong.
Well, Meg gets less scenes to herself overall. I agree. But they include Mr. Brooke in, like, every activity, and you can see him there, you know, even if he doesn't talk.
But I think that's the same in the book, too. Like, even if he's not the central part of the scene. Like,
I guess he's just easier to ignore when he gets listed as one of the characters that are present at the beginning of the scene, and then you don't think about him again.
But I love I love that in the book. There's so much more of that, like Mr. Brooke goes to Washington, and that was in the movie, but, like, then Marmee comes home and talks about, like, how helpful he was and how much they like him and how much Father loves talking with him, and I just a lot of those key things that are kind of pivotal in in her falling for him. And then I don't like that they took out a lot of their marriage, you know.
They don't. Do they even have the kids in the movie?
Yeah, they have the kids, but, like, they're like you don't ever do anything.
Yeah. But they're full characters in the book. They have a whole chapter or two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's like to me, it feels like the movie suggesting that Meg's story basically stops kind of after she gets married.
Right, there's, like, nothing
like
left.
we get a little bit afterwards, but, like, it's never anything that's, like, of the level of everything else. And of course the other two
I do like at the end. I do like at the end where they show, like, the whole family working in the school at Plumfield, and it shows Meg, like, actually, like, teaching, like, acting to kids, but it's not, like, addressed directly. It's just you may even, like, miss it if you don't notice it because you're focused on Joe walking through the scene and not necessarily on Meg over here to the side. But
yeah, I do think if she is the sister that gets the least credit in this version, like, even I think Beth just feels
release the Meg
like
cut,
an underdeveloped character. Even reading the book, she just feels kind of plain, whereas she's actually felt like a lot more full and a lot more part of the narrative in this movie than Meg does.
Yeah, and I think that's just they included Beth a lot more intentionally to develop Joe.
Yeah.
You know, you can't have Joe's development without Beth, whereas you can have Joe without Meg.
Yeah, and well, Cameron, you can go. You've been trying to say something.
I was just going to say that, like, you know, Beth is kind of like that central point around which, like, the story flows. Like, all the flashbacks are kind of as a result of, like, Joe coming home and thinking about all the things because of Beth. So, like, she's like the eye of the storm almost, where, like, everything swirls around, like, oh, it's Beth's about to die this time, so we actually have to think about it.
Yeah, and I'm just developing this thought as I say it, but I almost feel like in the book, Meg, as the oldest child, is almost like, and she has the most traditional life, so she's almost like the marker of traditional womanhood experience, and they kind of see her go through it before they each go through it in their own way. And I guess the movie just didn't need that measuring stick the way that the book did.
And they have to see Joe fighting against that, you know. Yeah. When they're at the sea and Laurie says, I know something you don't know, like, Mr. Brooke has Meg's glove, and, you know, Joe gets really upset, like, you have to have Meg make those choices so that Joe can, in contrast, like reject those choices, at least for the time being, you know. But
I think like part of what makes the book so interesting to me is that like I think childhood Meg is like is one of the less interesting characters, but by the time once she gets married and she has to do all kind of the adult things that she doesn't know how to do because no one taught her really, or you know she did with help but now she has to do it on her own, like that's where like a lot of my joy for Meg's character comes out, is like in those scenes after she's married. Like that's where you get kind of her complex story where she's trying to navigate, okay, here's what marriage is like, I didn't think it would be that way.
Right, like I feel like so much of her character is like wanting this idealized life, you know, that Sally Moffat has, where, you know, everything is beautiful and perfect and frilly, and she doesn't have that. She has to work for it. And so I love in the book that we see that work, because that is real life, you know, it's hard, and it's that those growing pains, not even just from growing from adulthood or from childhood to adulthood, but growing a relationship with another person. And I feel like the movie just missed a lot of that. I'm a big Mr. Brooke fan, and I feel like they did him dirty in this. They did not include him enough. Like, it just felt kind of random. And
I feel like he comes off a lot harsher in this movie than he does in the book.
Yeah, he's a very sweet and thoughtful
I felt
man.
Like the one scene that he gets that's significant is the one where she's overspending the money and he's checking the books. And in the book, I felt like he was, maybe this is just in my head, but in my mind, the things he was saying were very like, they were like gentle, but obviously made Meg feel bad. Whereas in the movie, he's very directly like admonishing her.
Yeah, I felt like he was being a little like passive aggressive. Like in the movie, he's like, "I'm sorry, you have to marry a man who can't give you these things." Like, that's not.
And he says, I mean, they almost gave him like the exact lines, I think, but just the way they're delivered completely changes it from how I read it.
Well, I also think that, like, you know, if we're thinking about this whole, to me, this movie is all about, like, you know, how do people accrue capital and how do, you know, they get money? Because, I mean, this is like the one scene from their marriage that they include, and it's explicitly about the money issue in the family.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because I was thinking the other scene that would have really given him some character is when he helps raise the kids and has to, like, help send them to bed, and they show him being, like, kind of a good father. But that, I guess, like you're saying, is not a topic that the movie's really concerned with. It's focusing on how women relate to money, basically. So,
which is fine, because, like, I understand that, like, you only got 2 hours to do this, and you got to pick one.
You have to pick one or two of the themes from the book, because that's all you're going to be able to discuss in any detail.
I just like Meg's character, so I'm sad that it, like, because she's not super relevant to the theme that is being told, that she gets cut out of a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, do we want to talk about Beth? I love Beth. I mean, who doesn't, of course. That's kind of the...
I think, like I kind of said earlier, this movie helped me see Beth more as a more complete character. Like, I think she is more prominent and just seemed... like, it helped focus on her and who she is more fully.
I think it's so funny that you say that, though, because I don't think there was anything that Beth did in the movie that she didn't.
Yeah, it's not anything different. I think it's just presented. It's more of a percentage of the movie than it is of the book.
I almost feel opposite. I almost feel like Beth had some erasure too, although I feel like maybe some of that is deliberate. Like, there's that scene where she's talking about going to the Hummels when Marmee is away, and the girls are like, "No, we'll do it later. Like, we can't go right now. We're busy." And she's like just trying to get a word in, and then she kind of just quickly says, "Okay, I guess I'll go." And like, I guess that's part of the point. Like, she blends in and isn't the loudest voice in the room. But
well, I guess,
I mean,
it's less her character entirely and more I think it's a more obvious direct friendship with Mr. Lawrence, which is very sweet. Like, obviously he lets her use the piano in the book and she gives him the gift in the book. But it felt like in the movie there was a more obvious, like they stayed friends and they were kind of closer to each other than any of the other girls were to him. And it was just kind of sweet to see throughout the movie.
So the way I view Beth is that in the book, like, I do think that part of her purpose in the book is to kind of be a little bit like lost in the narration, where you like almost don't quite think of her. Like, she's always almost like the afterthought sister. And you're welcome to disagree with me on there. And then, but you see enough of her and kind of, you know, you understand what she wants and you understand kind of how sweet she is, that by the time you get to the point where she's almost going to suffer death from the scarlet fever, that you're kind of, you know, really worried that she's going to die. And then when she doesn't die, you're like super happy about it. And then she does later end up dying and you're like, oh, this was cruel. But like, you don't get that if it had been Joe that had died, like, and you have the same amount of like screen time, the same stuff happens, but at the end Joe dies, like, it would feel, it just wouldn't feel as impactful to me. It's the fact that like Beth is almost like too precious for the world, that like this is the only way that her story could end.
She's a very Johnny type.
She is a real Johnny type.
Yeah, I almost feel like that is the problem, is that everyone does view her as like this precious thing to be protected, and you know, I don't think she ever is given the chance to literally, yes, she's not given the chance to grow up in her own right, just because I feel like she gets underestimated, or she's treated more like the sweet little pet of the family rather than a person who can make mistakes and have faults and needs to learn and grow the way the other girls do.
Well, I mean, to me, that's like, you know, it's kind of important that like the other girls do kind of treat her as like the kind of sweet pet, because that's what kind of helps fuel the kind of emotions. It's like, it feels rude to call her this, but it's like whenever a dog dies in a movie or whatever, that's Beth.
Yeah. But I also love that she is the one who keeps Joe so grounded. I don't love that that's kind of like, it almost feels like that's her purpose in life, is to keep Joe from flying away. But, you know, the reason she's so precious to Joe, like the reason they're so close, is because Joe needs that gentleness and love from her. I almost feel like Beth is maybe the most like Marmee in a way. Like,
yeah, I mean, Marmee is very family. She stayed home with her family and raised her girls.
But also Marmee is very service oriented. Yeah. Like every time we see Marmee, she's going out to help with charity. She's, you know, working with the troops or the soldiers. She's working with the Hummels. Like, she's out in the community, even though she's staying home. She's not at home. She's never home. Like, she's always out helping people. And I think if Beth had been able to live, that's what she would have been too. I mean, obviously that is what killed her in the end, is the fact that she had such a generous heart and service mind.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say that there is the part in both the book and the movie, I think it's after Amy falls in the lake when they're ice skating, because Joe doesn't warn her, and her mom, Marmee does say, like, you know, Joe, you're a lot like me. Like, I deal with anger every day. I'm constantly angry. It's really kind of only your father that really kind of keeps it back in there. Which makes her seem to be more like Joe in that regard. Whereas, and maybe I'm just, you know, doing Beth a disservice as a character, but I don't really see that kind of stuff inside of her. She just seems like pure of heart through and through. And
that's true too. I mean, like, you know, that is a good point. I think Joe is more selfish than Marmee and Beth, for sure. How'd you all like Laura Dern in this movie?
I think she's great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, I think she's awesome too. I don't read like that inner like rage and anger from Laura Dern. Like, I wish this movie had done more with like when Amy gets struck by the teacher, like Marmee gets like super mad, and we see that rage from Marmee, that anger that she has to control and like hold back, and we don't get that in this movie. And so I felt like Laura Dern almost played Marmee too sweet and too gentle.
Well, I was thinking this when I first read it, that like, or when I first was watching the film, that like this Marmee character, or this portrayal of Marmee, seems much less like serious, whereas I think in the book she's like, I mean, she enjoys her life and loves her daughters, but she's still kind of very serious and very stern. And whereas I think in the movie she's a lot more like carefree and almost a little bit silly in kind of her portrayal of how she like acts and interacts with her children.
Yeah, and she's not as central to them. Like, it doesn't feel like Marmee is that, you know, moral compass or whatever that's tying them all together. Like, she just pops in every now and then in the movie, which I didn't love. Not anything against Laura Dern, though. Laura Dern is a treasure. But I will say,
I mean, I liked all the actors and actresses.
yeah, I think they all were good. Also, I'm a big fan of Aunt March. Joshua is not.
I just thought I was supposed to hate Aunt March. So it was a shock to me when Rachel was like, "What do you mean you hate Aunt March?"
The book version or the movie version?
Both. Like, I think in the book she's horrible, and in the movie Meryl Streep is.
I don't disagree that she's horrible. I don't disagree that she's horrible. I just really.
She's a character that you love to hate.
Yeah,
I don't hate that she's in the book. I just don't like her as a person.
I think Aunt March is so much like Amy. Like, I think she and Amy, and I think that's why they get on so well, is like, I feel like Aunt March is like Amy if Amy didn't have Laurie. Like, yeah. Aunt March is like that pragmatic, like practical, like business, like you've got to marry well, like that's your job, that's how you're going to contribute to this family, you know, because even Joe is like, well, you're not married, and she's like, well, that's because I'm rich, like. And so anyway, I like Aunt March as a character, just not because I like her, but because I think she shows kind of the necessity of strong partnerships. Otherwise,
I just think she's funny.
I think she's funny. I hate that they didn't include Aunt March's parrot. I think that was a big loss in the movie.
True. I liked that the parrot was able to like compose completely unique paragraph long thoughts in the book.
Yeah. Listen, Josh, what else would you expect from this book?
Oh, okay. And I know we touched on it some already, but I feel like getting towards the end of the movie, you know, we're getting back to Joe and Mr. Bear and just the ending where she's writing her book and falling in love with
I really
Mr.
like
Bear.
that. I really like that scene where she's like actively writing like the first few chapters of the book.
I feel like that, you know how I mentioned, like, I feel like Greta Gerwig turned this into her autobiography, almost like imposed it on top of Louisa May Alcott's self-insert. That's the scene that makes that for me, because the scene that I always think of with this movie, even from like when I saw it in theaters, is when she is laying out the pages of the book on the floor and rearranging them. Because I'm like, the book is in order. Like, you wouldn't have had to rearrange it because it happens in order, but the movie doesn't. So that's Greta Gerwig taking the scenes of the movie or of the book and rearranging them for her movie. Like, that's what you're actually watching when you watch that scene.
Yeah. Well, but also
I hadn't considered that.
Or the book is so episodic. Like, you know, she is writing these specific memories and probably arranging them in the best way that they fit, even if it's not necessarily exactly chronological the way it actually happened.
Yeah,
See,
but
I interpreted it
my way is
like,
more clever, so it's probably right.
I guess yours is the way that you get an A in English class. I guess,
but I also feel like so many of the scenes that focus on her being a writer aren't about her writing. They're about editing and being edited. Like, that's her editing when she's rearranging the papers. She's being edited when she's like the injustice of him crossing out a bunch of the pages and saying, we'll take it if you make it shorter. We'll take it if she gets married at the end. Which, like, that, yeah, that's what happens in the book too. But there's also more scenes of her just sitting down to write, I think, in the book than there are in the movie. Whereas the movie chooses to include all the scenes where she faces what she feels like is this injustice of someone else, and specifically this man editing her.
and I guess the book does, or the movie does end with like the actual like printing of the book, which is like, okay, the story's finished because we can't re-edit this in any way. Like, you know, we reached the end.
One thing I don't like in the movie is that we never go back to, and maybe I just missed it, but we never go back to like a scene between Joe and Friedrich where she shows him her new work. Like, he criticizes her in the beginning and is saying like, this isn't genuine, this isn't who you are, like your writing should reflect you, not just what sells. And then she never goes back and is like, here's who I am.
I guess it like does feel like kind of a little bit of a dropped thread where it's like, even if you just had like him standing next to her while she's watching the book being printed or whatever,
Yeah.
like would kind of tie up that thread. But it also kind of like detracts it away from being like about her, which is like what it so clearly is about. You know, it's her work.
And not to bring up the 94 version again, but one thing I like in that version is that she begins writing the book Little Women like when she's in New York and leaves Bear a copy of it, and he is actually the one who like delivers the like published copy to her. Like, and so in this version I just felt like, and of course it doesn't happen in the movie or in the book, like she doesn't write the book in the book.
She doesn't.
But I just felt like that was a missed thing to go back with Bear and have that closure of, you know, that conflict.
Yeah.
Did you all like that at the end Joe did not go after Friedrich until she was like
pushed
by all the other
This is what I was
women?
about to bring up if nobody else had a topic. I didn't hate the way the movie does the proposal if you take out all the meta stuff it's doing at the same time and just look at how it films the proposal. I didn't hate it, but I definitely like the way it happens in the book more. Like, I liked that it was more mundane, and like the book even says like, well, both their hands were full and they couldn't lean over and kiss each other, so they just kind of agreed to get married and looked at each other. Like, I thought it was very unique and sweet in the book, and it lost that by making it this grand moment in the movie.
It just reminds me so much of like in movies where like they go in there and try and stop like their love from getting onto the plane.
It was
whatever.
very like rom-com, chasing after the person getting on the
Yeah.
plane.
Well, and I feel like it took away from the whole point is that Joe has to realize herself that she does love someone.
Yeah.
Like she has fallen in love. And in the movie,
But I think
she does, it's other people telling
Yeah.
her, you love him.
well, in the movie, it's other people, and again, we can get into how much of this was also told to Louisa May Alcott in real life, but in the movie, it's also another person telling her the character has to get married at the end. So I think that's the, like, if you include that scene, then you can't also include like, you can't include a completely genuine, not ironic proposal scene because it's not going to be authentic to the movie if you've also included a scene saying, well, you have to include a marriage whether you like it or not.
But I mean, I think part of the thing is like, you have to include a marriage whether you like it or not. Maybe that's true in, you know, for the context of like this film, but like, you have the complete authority to make those relationships full and like fulfilling.
Right,
you don't have to be like, oh, they get together just because they have to get together.
But I
They
think
get
that's what the
together because
movie wants to say, is the movie wants you to be a little upset that it's not with Laurie like everyone tends to wants to think before they get to the end of the book, and it wants you to be a little upset that she gets married at all if it's not to Laurie, because I think that's how I mean, as far as I can tell, that's how Greta Gerwig feels. So
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really have a problem with like the marriage scene, other than I thought that it was like maybe a little bit too much like a rom-com, like. But I almost feel like it was almost, you know, making fun of that.
Okay, well, I figured that we couldn't have a Little Women podcast episode without figuring out which March sister we are. And so, guys, I have texted both of you a link to a BuzzFeed quiz. Which Little Women character are you? And so I thought that we could go through this.
okay, can I say
Quiz.
one or two more things about the movie?
Yes.
Okay. First, this is way earlier in the movie, but we just didn't come up naturally. Amy directly complains about like being settled for by Laurie in the movie, and I don't think she ever does that in the book. She's never like, well, you couldn't have Joe, so now you want me. And I thought that was realistic. Like, I thought it was a nice inclusion, because realistically, she probably would. I mean, like, Laurie in the book literally goes through like the entire list of girls other than Beth. Like, he starts out thinking about how hot Meg is all the time, and then he's in love with Joe on like a character level, and then he moves on to Amy. So,
And
I thought that was one of the things that was added that I liked.
it's funny, too, though, because Joe in the book is the one who thinks that Beth and Laurie might get together, and that's why she goes to New York, is so that they can have some time.
Yeah, and it mainly because she thought Beth was lovesick, and I guess she
Yeah.
just figured Laurie would submit to whichever relationship with her March sister he could. So,
Yeah, I think that is a lot of people's like big complaint, is that it's not super fair that Amy is like the second choice. However, I wonder if that's like even just culturally, like back in the 1800s, wouldn't it have been more common to end up with a sibling of someone? Like,
yeah, it's very
I don't know.
biblical.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is.
The last thing that I don't think we really touched on, maybe last one or two things. I think the scene from
I just now had this thought. They're watching when they're watching the Shakespeare play, they're watching Twelfth Night, right? Where like
I didn't pay
there's,
enough attention, but that's believable.
Well, I thought it was Viola, who is from Twelfth Night, right?
Yeah.
There's no other Viola from Shakespeare. I don't know. So like, and that play does end with
Siblings,
you know,
basically swapping and getting
siblings
married.
exchanging relationships so that they can date the person they want to date.
Yeah. It also goes, maybe as a reference to Joe being tomboyish, since Viola is a character that's very comfortable cross-dressing as a man throughout the play. And so that's interesting that they thought you were thinking of that as they put that in the movie. I feel like, to me, the scene from this movie that's like lasting and iconic and like what it added to the Little Women verse, I guess, is Laurie's confession of love to Joe in this movie. I thought was just like so well done, and it's so emotionally impactful, and it's like the scene I think of when I think of this movie. I don't know if you guys felt the same way about it.
Which one? Do you mean his
Like
grand
where-
gesture, or do you mean his at
They're
the
at-
end where he says like
Like when Joe's
I've
got the
always-
little like tan coat on and they're marching down the hill and they're both very like sad.
See,
I just think the
I like
acting
that
there
scene.
is
I really
perfect. The dialogue is well written.
I like the ending shot where she's just kind of sitting there and there's like a church in the background and it's just like very solitary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, Joshua, that I think that is just an iconic scene for sure, and it's what I think of when I think of
This version.
this version for sure. I also love the scene at the end where he comes to her and he's the one who tells her about him and Amy, and he even says, like, I've always loved you, but the way I love Amy is different. Like, I felt like that was necessary.
Yeah, and I felt like it would be easy for that to feel perfunctory, like we had to include this because it's kind of a weird move, which it is in the book and the movie. But the book has so much time to develop it. I think in the movie it would have been easy, again, for it to feel false, but I think it's delivered and acted well enough that you can buy it.
And it just goes to show how much they have grown. You know, Laurie and Joe both are so they so over romanticize life when they're young, and they have this grand idea of what love is and what love looks like based on the theater and the books and the operas. You know, they have this idea in their head, and then they finally actually learn, both of them, what love really is and what it really feels like. And so I think it's really fitting. You have this grand declaration at first, that's what they think it is or what it should be, and then more quiet.
And then final thing I want to mention before we forget to is stuff about Joe's school. In the book, it is very specifically a school for boys, and Joe's going to raise little boys to be proper or whatever. And in the movie, they specifically mention the concept of women's colleges, and then she says, I'll have a school for boys and girls. So I just thought it was interesting that they felt the need to change that. Because I felt like the school for boys made sense because Joe is so boyish and kind of proud of being boyish.
Yeah. Well, and so much of the book is Joe talking about how she raised her boy, Laurie, like she...
Yeah. And I think it's almost like in the book, there's like this charitable aspect of they'll take in like orphaned and poor kids or poor boys. And they change that in the movie to the charitable aspect is the fact that it's for girls too.
Well, the book does also mention that like they're deliberately taking in mixed race children.
Yeah. One specific mixed race kid, but yeah. Because
I don't know, that kind of, to me, that was, an aspect of the fact that, this is set during the Civil War and immediately afterwards.
And Louisa May Alcott was an abolitionist, and the reason the March family is poor is that they gave all their money to John Brown. So that is something that doesn't come up at all in the movie. That is kind of an very interesting fact about the book. And then, going along with the school, do you guys think that like reality diverges at the end of the movie? Like, is there a reality where Joe writes Little Women and a reality that she's writing about where she gets married? Or do you think those all actually do coexist and the Joe of the movie we're supposed to think gets married? Do you know what I'm saying?
Like two alternate.
Yeah.
Like, it almost feels like when the editor says, well, she has to get married, and they cut to the proposal, is that proposal and the marriage and founding the school an alternate reality that we're seeing that's the end of the book, but not really Joe's life? Or are we supposed to assume all of it really happened?
I think all of it really happens, because to me, her like decision to include getting married is kind of there to be a little bit like, because beforehand she had to like sacrifice things, like in terms of to get published, she had to sacrifice the kind of quality of stuff that she wrote or kind of the topics of stuff she wrote. And here she's like, well, they have to get married at the end, but she's fine with that now because she is getting married. So I see, so she's like, has to sacrifice to publish it or whatever, but still manages to like get what she wants because she does want to marry Mr. Bear.
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of Joe's childhood, she thought of marriage as like the loss of freedom, and the loss of herself. And when she meets Friedrich, she realizes that's not the case. I mean, he's the one who's pushing her to realize her dreams and accomplish those things and become better. he's helping her to remain ambitious and to grow. So I think it's a good, they're not mutually exclusive. Like you can be in a loving partnership and also still independent and successful.
Well, I don't think I ever disputed that when I asked
No,
it.
but I mean, the idea of having like an alternate reality would mean she would have to choose, one or the other.
Well, but
I mean,
I guess
it is a little interesting that like you have like the shot beforehand where it's like all of them in the house kind of working together and having a pleasant life, next to the shots where she's standing there by herself kind of watching this.
Yeah,
so, like,
and the final shot is so conflicted in that she like smiles and then frowns and then kind of has a plain face and then it ends. Like it don't like Little Women feels like a movie that should be so light and joyful about life, other than it has some of the realities like death, but the movie very much ends kind of on a bummer note. I feel like
I
because it's
don't
I think
know
it's
if I agree with that.
I think it's Jo looking at her life / her book and thinking, well, this isn't really the book I wanted to write, but it's the book I had to. And
I think that she's just more overwhelmed by like that relationship that she's put onto the page, because you have that scene, that kind of shot where they go back in time to well before the movie starts, where it's just 4 girls, making tea or having a tea party and then, playing with swords. And that's like before, that's not anything that happens in the movies or whatever, or in the book. So it's like her kind of reminiscing about this is where they came from and here's where they are. And that, incorporates a lot of sadness or happiness, because like that's what you experience when you read the book.
I'm ready to take the which Little Woman am I quiz.
Yes, well, I just figured
I already took it.
You just can't talk about Little Women without knowing which Little Woman.
I was gonna like narrate me answering the questions, but I guess I'll just take it silently.
Oh well, I thought I would, since I found the quiz, I thought I'd narrate it.
Okay.
All right. First question: how do you spend your free time? And of course, every Little Women quiz is like very
direct.
Very direct. So, reading or writing, hanging out with friends, listening to music, or volunteering.
I host this podcast, so I answered that: reading or writing.
As did I.
I said hanging out with friends. What is one word you'd use to describe yourself? Quiet, honest, hardworking, or dedicated?
I think dedicated.
I said dedicated.
I said quiet.
What are your goals in life? To play music and make people happy, to achieve my artistic dreams and be loved by everyone, to live a simple life and settle down in a small, cozy home, or to become very successful and run my own business?
Which deliberate answer do I want to make to choose my answer? I chose to achieve my artistic dreams.
Yeah, that's what I went with.
More so for that first part, and not the like be loved by everyone part.
Right.
I chose to live a simple life and settle down.
I chose artistic dreams. Okay.
How would you describe your style? Trendy and expensive, minimalistic and casual, classy and professional, whatever's clean.
Whatever's clean.
I put classy and professional, although, as Rachel knows, I'm in the middle of a wardrobe changeover to that.
I would say I don't spend a lot of money on my clothes, but I would say I'm more trendy than anything else. What would you do if you won the lottery? Buy a ton of books or instruments, move to a quiet cottage in the middle of the woods somewhere, donate it to charity, or travel the world?
Travel the world.
See,
for
this
me.
is where I would like. See, I feel like I would do 2 of these things, because I would definitely, the one I selected was buy a ton of books or instruments, but I feel like I would do that and then I'd probably donate the vast majority of it first.
Yeah, I feel like I'd do a little bit of all of these, but if I had to pick one, as is the premise of the quiz, I would travel the world.
For me, it'd be the quiet cottage, like buying my dream home. In your family,
You're such a Meg.
In your family, what role would you give yourself? The helper, the favorite, the troublemaker, or the independent one?
The troublemaker.
It's an interesting question, because it's what role would you give yourself, not what do people see you as. I think I will be the favorite.
I think I would be the independent one.
Very middle child vibes. With that. If you could go on any of these trips next week, where would you go? I'd rather stay home, take a tour of Europe, travel to New York City, or visit friends who live out of town.
I'd rather stay home.
I would take a tour of Europe.
I'd rather take a tour of Europe for sure. All right, next, choose a flower: sunflower, rose, peony, or lily.
I don't know a lot about flowers.
I chose a lily.
I like the picture of the peony.
I like the peony too. At a party, where can you be found? In deep conversation, helping clean up, flirting, or hiding in the bathroom?
Hiding in the bathroom.
In
for
deep
me.
conversation.
I'm hiding in the bathroom.
Okay.
I guess it depends on like what kind of party
It's
it
the
is.
moment of truth.
It's the moment of truth.
Cameron, what are you?
I'm Joe March.
Ooh.
Looks like Rachel and I are both Amy March.
Wow. And that is so interesting
Wow.
because
I felt like I was I tried to answer honestly, but I felt like I was answering as Joe, and that's not. And
I feel like in real life I am much more of a Meg.
I felt like you were
See, that's
answering
what I
as
said.
Meg.
You're such a
Yeah.
Meg.
But
There's
there's
just a few
probably
things that make
one
me Amy.
one really important question that we answered
Yeah.
Amy style.
It's the
Taking
first
a tour
one.
of Europe.
I also will say
and
I've
traveling
taken
the world.
I've taken probably 20 Which Little Women Are You or Which Little Woman Are You quizzes this week, trying to find the best one, and I most of the time am Meg. So I don't know.
So you had us take
this
the
is the best
one that
one.
you don't think accurately reflects you.
Well, I hadn't taken this one. I wanted to. I looked through the questions of this.
I do.
Wait, you haven't taken this one, but you.
I do think Which Little Women Are You? Like if you read the book and then pick one, is probably a much more accurate and predictive personality test than like Myers-Briggs.
I tried to find one that
Well, that's not hard to do.
I tried to find one that had the best questions.
I wonder what your
I'm
answer
very
profile has to
curious
look like to get Beth, because like
Stay home.
all the questions that could be Beth are also Meg, and except you just don't die. Like,
Well, so it would be I'd rather stay home, the favorite, donate to charity, probably minimalistic and casual,
yeah. Let's see. So like,
play music and make people happy.
you like to listen to music. You're quiet. Play music. Minimalist and casual.
Well, volunteering would be.
Charity. The
Yeah.
helper.
Helping clean up.
I'd rather stay home.
The flower one, I have no idea.
Sunflower.
I know the book talked a lot about
There
flowers.
is a
Yeah, I got Beth. Answering the ones I thought were Beth.
Yeah. Well, at least we know it's probably consistent. Yeah, I don't remember all that. I know they mentioned the flowers in the book. I don't remember anything about it.
And it's not. I don't think this quiz from BuzzFeed is very book.
Yeah, I don't think they were cracking the spine as they wrote this one.
BuzzFeed is serious journalism, guys.
Okay, so Rachel has admitted that she does not understand our rating system, which is perfect. That's exactly how we wanted it to be.
That's good. Exactly. Incomprehensible.
So, but that is why I will put the onus on her this time. So, Rachel, if the novel Little Women, you were adapting it, but to adapt it, it was really a video game, what video game do you think it would be?
Animal Crossing.
Okay. So, Animal Crossing.
She doesn't understand. She doesn't understand our rating system. There's 4 choices. It's not hard.
Would it be Yoshi, which means it would be easy to turn into a movie? No, sorry, Kirby. Kirby, it would be easy to turn into a movie. Yoshi, it would be medium
Yoshi.
difficulty to turn into a movie. Mario, it would be fairly hard to turn into a movie. Or Donkey Kong, it would be almost impossible to make a good movie, even if the book is good.
Okay, so I'm rating how
difficult-
how adaptable is the book.
Yeah,
That's the premise.
so that we can
of the
grade things on a
podcast.
curve if they're a good adaptation of a harder to adapt
Give them to
book.
me again. It's Kirby. Then what's the next one?
Kirby, Yoshi, Mario, Donkey Kong. The fact that you have not touched like any of these games before makes it even easier for you, of course.
I've got to say, I think it's a very adaptable book. Just because of how the book is, it's so like here's things that happen in order that they happen. I'm gonna give it Yoshi. I think there's some things that the movie misses, and
Well, we're not We're not on how did the movie do at it yet. We're on how hard is it for the book to turn in. How hard is
it to turn into a movie? Yeah, I'd say it's fairly easy.
But not just
but
like
not
a
the
cakewalk.
easiest. Yeah.
Cameron, where are you at?
See, I'm at a Mario, if only because, like, there's so much in this book. There's, like, 4 protagonists in this book.
I don't understand this rating system. All right, you're at a Mario.
I'm at a Mario, too. Because...
like, there's just...
I think you could make a killer mini-series if you had, like, all the time in the world to adapt it. But to make it a movie, it's such a tome for a children's book. And there's so many characters.
And yet, how many Little Women movies are there? There's so many.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean they're all successful. But I just think to adapt it in any way that's faithful, where you keep the story and where you also include any sort of thematic resonance, just seems hard to accomplish in like the 2-ish hours that you have. So I would put it at a Mario.
Yeah.
Okay, I feel like I feel that same sentiment. Just
so you're really at a Mario too. You just didn't know it.
Once you keep using this grading system, it becomes much easier.
Okay.
So now that we've established that the novel Little Women is a Mario, the movie Little Women 2019, directed by Greta Gerwig, how well did it do at playing the Mario game that is the book Little Women?
My brain's a little broken.
Do you want to explain to her the score?
Well, I'm letting her innovate.
Okay, that's fine.
As someone who's like never touched a Mario game ever, so you're asking me,
but like some reasonable. Okay, I'll give you some of the scoring system. Like, if it's a fairly good adaptation, but you don't think it like goes above and beyond, that would be it beat the game. Like
100%. Like it
beat the game. It accomplished what it had to do.
Do all the little things.
Right. If you think it went above and beyond, like it added new thematic resonance that you really appreciated, you think it was just stellar at adapting the book, not necessarily as a movie, that would be like it completed. Like it got all the achievements, all the unlockables, it found all the secrets. If you don't think it was very good at adapting the book, like you would give it didn't even beat it.
I think it's close to beating the game, like 90%, but not all the way there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think that's our first... from anyone on this podcast and any of the works we've touched so far, that's our first one that did not beat it.
Did not beat the game? Wow. And maybe it's just me as a critic.
I'm glad that it was the woman.
We've had, an hour and 40 minutes to talk about all the things that I didn't love. So.
Yeah. All right. Cameron, where are you at?
I think I'm at a beat it, if only because, like, I don't think you could have done a better job in 2 hours. But, like,
well, apparently,
we
need to go watch the 1994
one. You could have done a better yeah. You might. I just think that, like, because there's so much cut out and so much of, like, Meg's character, I feel like you can't, like, say it's fully explored the novel because it, like, cut out, like, one of the characters, basically.
I think that's the biggest thing for me is just the Meg injustice. I don't think you can have a truly, like, feminist interpretation without also exploring Meg's path as well.
Yeah. Which
again,
you know what it is?
In only 2 hours, it's hard to do that, so...
I'll amend my point. It's like how in Mario, like if you like skip a world or whatever, that's what happened. We skipped the world.
It uses the warp pipe, so like it beat it, but with an asterisk. Yeah.
This is the most incomprehensible grading system.
Well,
I love it.
I think it's interesting that our problems are kind of with how the movie's almost unfair to women who get married, which is kind of an insane thing to say, because Greta Gerwig is married very famously to another director. Like, but I would put it at beat it kind of almost for a different reason, which is I agree there's things that's missing from the book. I think it takes some things out from the book, but adds its own thematic points and mission and accomplishes that well enough as like a standalone movie that I think it still gets the job done. Basically, like it's still a good movie on its own merits, which I get is not exactly the point of our rating system, but adds interesting things of its own, even if they aren't things from the book.
Yeah. I mean, I think the point of our rating system is to be confusing.
Yeah, so we can do whatever we want with it. All right.
Well, it has been really good to talk with you guys about Little Women. I hope I didn't ramble too much. I think I could talk about this movie or just about Little Women in general for days and days and days. But
listen, there's like 8 adaptations. That's 8 episodes right there.
And I'm telling you, the 94 version, I love Saoirse Ronan, but she's no Winona Ryder. And so we've got to do that one next. Or not next, but at some point in the future.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to keep in our back pocket episodes where we don't have to read an entire book to record them. So we'll come back to it. Are we ready to wrap up?
I can do the outro.
Oh, well, before we do that, so that if anyone is following along and wants to prepare for next episode, it's a big one. The Wonkaverse. It's going to require the most homework in terms of movies of anything we've done so far, but the book is relatively short. So it's going to be the novel Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl, but we will touch at least a little bit on Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory with Gene Wilder, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory with Johnny Depp, and of course, starring everyone's favorite actor for Laurie, Wonka with Timothée Chalamet. So get ready for all of that next episode.
I think Wonkapocalypse is a better title for it, but we can debate that later.
All right.
All right. Let's roll out.
Okay. Well, that's all, folks. As always, we'd like to give credit to those that made this podcast possible, those that worked on the adaptation. A great big thanks for making the world just a little bit more artful. To all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Join us next week as we investigate the bizarre world of the Wonkaverse.
They will hang Jeff Davis to a sour apple tree. They'll hang Jeff Davis to a sour apple tree. They'll hang Jeff Davis to a sour apple tree. And they go marching along.